What if I told you that when an empath walks away, it's not just love that disappears, it's energy. And some people don't know how to survive without it. Most narcissists don't miss you the way you think they do. They miss the power, the warmth, the charge they used to feed on. And when that sexual and emotional energy is cut off, something uncomfortable happens. Their behavior changes. Habits form. Patterns turn ugly. Things they hide start leaking out in subtle but disturbing ways. Today, we're talking about the side no one explains, the desperate coping, the quiet spirals, the things they do when the supply ends and silence replaces access. If you've ever wondered why they suddenly act reckless, empty, or strangely obsessed after you detach, stay with me until the end, because this will connect dots you didn't even know existed. And as you listen, if something clicks or feels familiar, let your voice be part of this space. Drop a comment. Share your insight. And if you're ready to see deeper truths like this more often, hit subscribe and walk this journey with us. When an empath finally withdraws their sexual and emotional energy, something subtle but disturbing begins to unfold in the narcissist's inner world. What once came effortlessly through a deep, bonded connection suddenly vanishes, leaving behind a hunger they do not know how to sit with. Instead of reflecting or healing, they scatter. Their attention splinters. You may notice them reaching outward in every direction at once, sending messages late at night, flirting without meaning, chasing reactions rather than connection. This is not confidence or freedom, it is scavenging. The empath's energy used to be rich, grounding, and regulating. Without it, the narcissist cannot self-soothe. One source is never enough anymore, because shallow attention does not nourish the way true energetic exchange once did. So they collect fragments, compliments here, desire there, a moment of being wanted somewhere else, hoping that if they stack enough of it together, the emptiness will quiet down. But it never does. What makes this pattern especially revealing is how mechanical it becomes. The narcissist is no longer choosing people. They are sampling reactions. A message is sent not out of interest, but out of urgency. Flirting turns into a reflex, not a feeling. The goal is no longer intimacy, but stimulation, proof that they still exist, that they can still pull energy from someone, anyone. And because each interaction lacks depth, the satisfaction fades almost instantly, forcing them to move on to the next source. This is why their behavior often appears restless or scattered after the empath detaches. Their nervous system has learned to rely on external energy regulation, and when the primary source is gone, they scramble to replace it with quantity instead of quality. There is also a quiet humiliation beneath this behavior, even if they would never admit it. Deep down, the narcissist knows that what they are collecting is thin and temporary. The empath's presence once mirrored their worth back to them in a way that felt stabilizing. Losing that mirror creates a sense of inner collapse, and instead of facing it, they try to outrun it through constant engagement. This is why they often appear more active online, more flirtatious, more performative after a breakup or emotional cutoff. It is not growth. It is depletion masked as movement. Over time, this scavenging deepens the emptiness rather than filling it. Each shallow connection reinforces the truth they are trying to escape, that without access to an empath's energy, they feel unanchored. No single person can hold their attention for long, because no one is offering what they truly crave: emotional resonance, presence, and genuine exchange. The tragedy is that the empath did not take anything away by leaving. They simply stopped giving what was never meant to be drained. And what follows is not freedom for the narcissist, but a restless hunger that exposes how dependent they truly were on borrowed energy. When the empath's energy is no longer available, the narcissist's focus quietly shifts in a revealing way. Desire is no longer about connection, curiosity, or shared presence. It becomes about being wanted, seen, and confirmed. This is where compulsive validation loops begin. Instead of longing for someone specific, they chase the feeling of desirability itself. A like, a reply, a glance, a compliment. Each one becomes a small hit of reassurance that temporarily soothes their fragile sense of worth. But the relief never lasts. It fades quickly, forcing them back into the same cycle again and again, searching for the next sign that they still matter. In healthy intimacy, desire flows both ways. There is interest, choice, and mutual engagement. In validation loops, however, the narcissist is not choosing anyone. They are measuring themselves through reactions. The question running beneath their actions is no longer, "Who do I want?" but "Who still wants me?" This subtle shift turns people into mirrors rather than partners. Online, this often shows up as constant posting, provocative updates, exaggerated confidence, or carefully crafted images designed to trigger attention. Offline, it can look like exaggerated charm, unnecessary flirting, or inserting themselves into situations where admiration is likely. None of it is accidental. Each move is designed to provoke a response. What makes this loop so exhausting is that validation without intimacy has no staying power. Being desired feels good for a moment, but it does not anchor the self. Without emotional depth, every compliment expires almost as soon as it is received. This creates a restless urgency, a need to keep checking, refreshing, and engaging, as if silence itself were threatening. The narcissist may appear busy, socially active, or in demand, but internally there is often anxiety and pressure. The absence of response feels like rejection, even when no connection ever existed. Over time, this obsession with being desired replaces genuine self-worth. Instead of building an inner sense of value, the narcissist relies on external feedback to regulate their emotions. This is why the behavior can become compulsive. The phone is checked repeatedly. Conversations are kept alive longer than necessary. Boundaries blur. Attention becomes a form of emotional survival rather than enjoyment. And because the empath once offered steady, attuned validation rooted in real presence, losing that source makes the contrast painfully clear. No amount of surface-level admiration can replace what was lost. In the end, compulsive validation loops reveal a core truth the narcissist tries to avoid. Being desired is not the same as being connected. Proof of worth gathered from the outside can never substitute for a stable sense of self. Without intimacy, validation becomes a treadmill, constant motion, no arrival, and an increasing fear of stopping. When empathic bonding is removed, the narcissist's perception of people quietly but profoundly changes. Without the steady presence of someone who reflected emotion, nuance, and humanity back to them, others stop registering as full individuals and begin to function more like instruments. Interaction becomes transactional. A person is no longer someone to know, understand, or respect, but a source of energy, attention to extract, reactions to trigger, validation to consume. This is where objectification intensifies. Conversations lose depth and curiosity. Boundaries feel inconvenient. The focus narrows to what someone can provide in the moment rather than who they are. Bodies, admiration, and emotional responses become interchangeable tools, briefly useful and easily replaced once their immediate purpose is served. The narcissist may appear charming or engaging on the surface, but beneath that presentation, there is a growing detachment that strips interactions of empathy and accountability. What makes this shift unsettling is how efficient it becomes. People are categorized quickly useful or not, responsive or dull, energizing or draining. Once a reaction is extracted, interest fades. If a person begins to expect consistency, respect, or emotional presence, they are often devalued or discarded. This is not because the other person did something wrong, but because genuine connection requires reciprocity, and reciprocity exposes vulnerability. Without empathic bonding to regulate their inner world, the narcissist avoids that risk by flattening others into roles rather than relationships. A laugh becomes proof of charm. Desire becomes proof of power. Attention becomes proof of existence. And once the proof is secured, the person who provided it becomes invisible. Over time, this pattern reinforces emotional numbness. When people are treated as tools, there is no space for remorse, curiosity, or repair. Discarding someone feels easier than engaging with discomfort. The narcissist may move quickly from one interaction to another, not because they are fulfilled, but because fulfillment is no longer the goal. Control and extraction replace intimacy. This is why their connections often feel short-lived, chaotic, or strangely hollow. Without empathic exchange, there is no emotional memory being formed, only momentary stimulation followed by emptiness. This intensified objectification also protects the narcissist from facing loss. Acknowledging others as full humans would mean acknowledging what was taken, what was misused, and what is now gone. Reducing people to functions keeps that awareness at a distance. Yet the cost is high. Each discarded interaction deepens isolation, even as it appears to offer abundance. The narcissist may be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly alone because none of those connections are real enough to anchor them. In contrast, the empath's withdrawal does not dehumanize others, it restores boundaries. The narcissist's response, however, exposes a dependency on energy without responsibility. Objectification is not strength or confidence. It is a coping mechanism for disconnection. And the more it intensifies, the clearer it becomes that without empathic bonding, the narcissist is not relating to people at all, but cycling through sources, hoping that consumption can replace connection, and learning again and again that it cannot. When the empath is no longer present, something essential disappears from the narcissist's intimate life. Even if they do not fully understand what it was, the emotional resonance that once gave meaning to closeness is gone, and what remains feels strangely empty. Intimacy loses its warmth. It becomes routine, predictable, and disconnected from feeling. Without an empath's attunement, the eye contact, the emotional responsiveness, the sense of being met, sex shifts into something mechanical. The body may still move through familiar patterns, but the emotional current that once made those moments feel alive is missing. What used to feel grounding now feels repetitive, like going through motions that no longer land anywhere inside. This is not pleasure in the deeper sense. It is stimulation without satisfaction. The empath once brought presence into intimacy. They felt, responded, and created a shared emotional field that made closeness meaningful. When that is gone, the narcissist often struggles to recreate the same experience. They may notice that encounters feel flat or rushed, even when attention is present. There is less patience, less curiosity, and less emotional engagement. Instead of connection, there is performance. Instead of mutual awareness, there is focus on outcome. This shift is subtle but powerful. The body is involved, but the heart is not. And without emotional participation, fulfillment becomes impossible. Each experience ends the same way it begins, unfinished, unresolved, and strangely hollow. Over time, this lack of resonance creates a growing sense of inner emptiness. Because the narcissist relied on the empath to bring emotional depth into intimacy. Losing that influence exposes how disconnected they are from their own feelings. Rather than confronting that void, they often repeat the same behaviors, hoping repetition will eventually produce the feeling they miss. But repetition without presence only deepens numbness. What once felt intense now feels dull. What once soothed now irritates. The absence of emotional bonding turns intimacy into a temporary distraction rather than a nourishing exchange. This is why some narcissists seem restless or dissatisfied even when they are not alone. It is not about access, it is about quality. The empath did not simply offer closeness, they offered meaning. Without that, physical experiences lose their ability to regulate emotion or affirm identity. Instead of feeling connected afterward, the narcissist may feel more depleted, more detached, and more aware of an internal gap they cannot explain. The act becomes something to escape into briefly, not something that restores them. The most difficult part of this shift is that it cannot be fixed externally. No new person, no increased frequency, and no novelty can recreate emotional resonance without vulnerability. And vulnerability is what the narcissist avoids. So intimacy remains mechanical, repeated without depth, and increasingly unsatisfying. The empath's absence does not remove pleasure, it removes purpose. And in that space, the narcissist is left confronting the truth they resist most. That without emotional connection, closeness becomes empty, and emptiness grows the more they try to fill it with repetition instead of reflection. When the empath finally reaches a place of peace, something unexpected is triggered inside the narcissist. It is not relief, it is not acceptance. It is envy, deep, burning, and unsettling envy. The empath is no longer reactive, no longer chasing explanations, no longer emotionally available for extraction. Instead, they appear calm, grounded, and strangely light, as if a heavy weight has been lifted. This quiet glow is not loud or performative, and that is what makes it unbearable to witness. The narcissist does not just see someone moving on, they see someone stabilizing without them. And for a personality built on external regulation, this feels like a direct threat to identity. The envy does not come from wanting the empath back in a healthy way. It comes from the realization that the empath's peace did not require their approval, remorse, or participation. The narcissist expected collapse, confusion, or lingering attachment. What they see instead is emotional detachment paired with clarity. The empath's nervous system is no longer dysregulated. Their energy is no longer leaking. They are no longer available for manipulation. This contrast exposes an uncomfortable truth. The narcissist is still restless, while the empath is settled. Still hungry, while the empath is nourished. Still reactive, while the empath is composed. That imbalance creates a quiet rage. Jealousy enters when the narcissist recognizes that the empath's glow is not an act. It is not a tactic. It is the natural result of reclaiming energy. The empath sleeps better, thinks clearer, laughs more freely. Their presence feels whole again, and because narcissists measure worth through comparison, this shift feels like loss of status. The empath was supposed to be diminished by separation. Instead, they are elevated. This reversal destabilizes the narcissist's internal narrative and ignites resentment. They begin to feel replaced not by another person, but by the empath's own selfhood. This envy is rarely expressed directly. Instead, it leaks out through behavior. Reckless coping habits emerge as an attempt to restore balance, not internally, but externally. The narcissist may suddenly appear chaotic, impulsive, or exaggerated. There may be excessive socializing, risky decisions, dramatic displays, or attention-seeking behaviors designed to prove that they are thriving. But beneath these actions is agitation, not joy. The goal is not fulfillment, it is distraction. They are trying to drown out the quiet comparison happening inside them every time they notice the empath's peace. One of the most unsettling aspects of this envy is that it targets the empath's emotional regulation. The narcissist does not envy possessions or success as much as they envy stability. The ability to sit with oneself without constant stimulation feels foreign and threatening. Watching the empath do this with ease triggers a sense of inferiority that the narcissist cannot tolerate consciously. Instead of introspection, they escalate. Instead of healing, they externalize. Reckless habits become a way to feel powerful again, even if that power is destructive. This is where behaviors often become more erratic. The narcissist may sabotage new connections, burn bridges, or oscillate between grandiosity and collapse. They may attempt to provoke the empath indirectly, hoping to disrupt the peace they cannot access themselves. Subtle jabs, sudden reappearances, or exaggerated displays of happiness are often attempts to regain energetic relevance. The calm of the empath feels like abandonment, not because the relationship ended, but because the empath is no longer emotionally tethered. The envy also reveals something deeper. The narcissist associates peace with control. When the empath was dysregulated, questioning, or emotionally invested, the narcissist felt important. Now that the empath is whole, that sense of importance evaporates. The narcissist is left confronting a version of reality where they are no longer central. This creates a profound identity rupture. If they are not needed to regulate someone else's emotions, then what is their role? Instead of answering that question, they act out. Reckless coping habits are not random. They are attempts to recreate intensity, because intensity feels like life to someone who does not know how to access depth. Calm feels empty. Silence feels threatening. Stability feels boring. So the narcissist chases chaos, even when it harms them, because chaos feels familiar. It mirrors the internal disorder they are trying to outrun. Meanwhile, the empath's peace acts as a mirror they cannot smash. It reflects back what they lack without saying a word. Over time, this envy can harden into bitterness. The narcissist may rewrite history to protect themselves, minimizing the empath's growth or labeling it as fake. They may convince themselves that the empath is suppressing pain, pretending, or secretly miserable. This narrative is not about the empath, it is about self-preservation. Acknowledging the empath's genuine peace would mean acknowledging the cost of misuse, manipulation, and avoidance. That acknowledgement is too destabilizing, so envy disguises itself as dismissal. Yet the truth remains visible. The empath's peace is not loud, but it is consistent. It does not fluctuate with attention or validation. It is not dependent on being seen. This steadiness contrasts sharply with the narcissist's emotional volatility. And that contrast continues to provoke reckless coping, because the narcissist is still trying to regulate from the outside what the empath has learned to regulate from within. In the end, envy toward the empath's peace is not about losing a person. It is about losing access to borrowed regulation. The empath did not win by outperforming the narcissist. They won by returning to themselves. And that is the most unbearable outcome for someone who survives by feeding on external energy. The calm, detached glow is not revenge. It is resolution. And for the narcissist, watching someone find resolution without them is more destabilizing than any argument, confrontation, or rejection could ever be. When the empath's presence is gone, and the usual sources of regulation no longer work, the narcissist often enters a phase of escalation that looks confusing from the outside, but feels urgent on the inside. The quiet left behind by detachment is not peaceful for them. It is unbearable. Without emotional resonance, validation loses its effect, routine feels numb, and stimulation fades too quickly. In this state, feeling nothing becomes more frightening than feeling something painful. So the nervous system pushes outward, searching for intensity. This is where riskier behavior begins, not as rebellion or freedom, but as a desperate attempt to shock the self back into sensation. The goal is not pleasure or connection, it is relief from emptiness. Even if that relief comes through chaos, escalation often starts subtly. What once felt exciting now feels dull, so the threshold for stimulation rises. Boundaries loosen, choices become impulsive. Situations that would have once felt inappropriate or unnecessary suddenly seem tempting because they promise a spike, adrenaline, fear, novelty, or taboo. The narcissist may rationalize these behaviors as living fully or being spontaneous, but beneath the surface there is agitation. Calm does not soothe them anymore. Predictability feels suffocating. Extremes feel alive. This is not confidence, it is dysregulation dressed up as boldness. As this pattern continues, the behaviors often grow more reckless. Taboo situations are pursued not because they align with values, but because they break monotony. Impulsive decisions replace thoughtful ones. There may be a disregard for consequences, timing, or impact on others. Inappropriate boundaries become easier to cross because the internal alarm system that normally checks behavior is already overwhelmed. The narcissist is not thinking long-term. They are chasing the immediate sensation of feeling something strong enough to cut through the numbness. Even negative attention or internal shame can feel preferable to emotional flatness. What makes this escalation particularly destructive is that it rarely delivers what it promises. The spike comes briefly and then collapses. The aftermath often includes regret, emptiness, and a growing sense of self-disgust. Instead of restoring a sense of self, these behaviors deepen the internal fracture. The narcissist may wake up after impulsive choices feeling more disconnected than before, yet unable to stop. This creates a cycle where intensity becomes the only available regulator, even as it erodes self-respect. Each extreme raises the bar for the next one, because the nervous system adapts quickly, and yesterday's shock becomes today's baseline. This is where inappropriate boundaries play a significant role. When empathy is low and urgency is high, other people become collateral. Lines that once existed to protect dignity, safety, or mutual respect are treated as obstacles rather than safeguards. The narcissist may intrude, provoke, or overstep, not out of calculated cruelty, but out of emotional desperation. Yet the impact is the same. Each crossed boundary reinforces a sense of being out of control, which feeds the very self-disgust they are trying to escape. Instead of grounding them, these actions further destabilize their identity. Internally, there is often a split happening. One part of the narcissist seeks stimulation at any cost, while another part quietly judges what is happening. This internal tension increases shame, which then fuels further escalation. Feeling ashamed but powerless to stop creates a volatile mix. The narcissist may swing between moments of grandiosity, convincing themselves they are above consequences, and moments of collapse, where emptiness feels even heavier than before. Risky behavior becomes a way to silence that inner conflict, even temporarily. The empath's absence plays a critical role in this dynamic. When the empath was present, their emotional attunement softened extremes. They provided grounding, reflection, and containment even without realizing it. Losing that influence exposes how unregulated the narcissist's inner world truly is. Instead of learning to self-regulate, they externalize the problem. They try to regulate through stimulation, danger, or shock. But these methods only amplify instability. The empath's calm once acted as a stabilizing force. Without it, the narcissist gravitates toward chaos, because chaos mirrors their internal state. Over time, this escalation erodes trust, not just with others, but with the self. The narcissist may begin to see themselves as someone who cannot be trusted to make good decisions, which deepens the reliance on impulse. The more reckless the behavior, the more fragmented the identity becomes. And yet, stopping feels impossible, because stopping would mean sitting with the emptiness they have been avoiding. Extremes feel like movement. Stillness feels like collapse. This pattern is often misunderstood as thrill, seeking, or moral failure, but at its core it is a nervous system in distress. The narcissist is chasing sensation, because sensation is the only thing that temporarily cuts through numbness. Unfortunately, the cost of this strategy is high. Each impulsive choice widens the gap between who they appear to be and how they feel inside. Each crossed boundary reinforces isolation. Each taboo crossed without reflection leaves behind residue, shame, confusion, and deeper disconnection. In the end, escalation into riskier behavior is not about desire for danger, it is about avoidance of emptiness. The narcissist is not trying to feel alive in a healthy way. They are trying not to feel dead inside. But extremes cannot restore wholeness. They can only distract from its absence. Without emotional regulation, self-awareness, and accountability, the chase for intensity becomes endless. And the more they push toward the edge to feel something, the further they move from the stability and connection they secretly crave. When access to the empath's energy is cut off, one of the narcissist's most predictable, yet deeply damaging responses is blame, shifting paired with sexual shaming. Rather than sitting with the discomfort of loss, dependency, or inner emptiness, they begin to rewrite the story. The empath is no longer someone who set boundaries or chose self-respect. Instead, they are reframed as cold, withholding, emotionally unavailable, or even damaged. This narrative shift is not accidental. It serves a psychological function. By repositioning the empath as the problem, the narcissist avoids confronting the reality that their sense of stability depended on access to someone else's emotional and sexual energy. Shame is redirected outward so it does not have to be felt inward. Sexual shaming, in particular, becomes a powerful tool in this rewrite. If the empath no longer offers intimacy, the narcissist reframes that choice as cruelty or dysfunction. What was once described as depth and sensitivity is suddenly labeled as repression or lack. This allows the narcissist to preserve their self-image as desirable and entitled, while casting the empath as deficient. The unspoken message becomes, if you were healthy, you would still give to me. In this way, the empath's boundaries are transformed into evidence against them. The narcissist no longer has to ask why the energy stopped flowing. They simply declare that it was wrongfully withheld. Blame shifting also protects the narcissist from acknowledging dependency. Admitting reliance on another person's emotional or sexual energy would expose vulnerability and imbalance, which clashes with their self-concept. So instead of recognizing that the empath provided grounding, regulation, and emotional depth, they minimize or deny its value. They tell themselves the empath was never warm enough, never giving enough, never open enough. This reframing soothes the ego, even as it distorts reality. The truth that the empath's presence stabilized them is replaced with a more convenient fiction that the empath failed to meet their needs. This narrative often spreads beyond the narcissist's inner world and into social spaces. Friends, new partners, or acquaintances may hear a carefully edited version of events where the empath is portrayed as distant or broken. This serves two purposes. First, it reinforces the narcissist's story through repetition. Second, it recruits external validation. If others agree that the empath was cold or difficult, the narcissist feels justified, even righteous. The need for accountability disappears, replaced by a sense of victimhood. The narcissist is no longer someone who lost access to energy. They are someone who was unfairly denied it. Sexual shaming also acts as a form of retaliation. When the empath detaches, especially calmly, it triggers feelings of rejection and powerlessness. Labeling the empath as sexually withholding becomes a way to regain control. It reframes the empath's choice as an offense rather than an act of self-protection. This is particularly destabilizing for empaths, who are often deeply attuned to others' needs and prone to self-reflection. The accusation can linger, creating doubt. The narcissist relies on this doubt. If the empath questions themselves, the narcissist avoids facing their own role in the dynamic. What is rarely acknowledged in this process is how revealing the behavior actually is. The intensity of blame often mirrors the depth of dependency. The more the narcissist relied on the empath's energy, the harsher the rewrite becomes. Calm detachment from the empath feels intolerable because it offers no emotional reaction to feed on. So the narcissist escalates the narrative, hoping to provoke guilt, explanation, or defense. Any response, even pain, feels preferable to indifference. Blame shifting becomes a bid for relevance, disguised as criticism. Over time, this pattern erodes the narcissist's ability to form genuine intimacy. By framing boundaries as cruelty and autonomy as coldness, they reinforce a worldview where others exist to regulate their emotions. Sexual shaming replaces honest communication. Projection replaces reflection. Instead of asking, "Why did this connection end?" they assert, "This person was flawed." Each rewrite distances them further from self-awareness. The story may protect them temporarily, but it also locks them into repetition. Without insight, the same dynamics are recreated with new people, followed by the same collapse when energy is withdrawn. For the empath, understanding this pattern is crucial. The labels placed on them are not diagnoses, they are defenses. Being called withholding often means no longer accessible. Being called cold often means no longer reactive. Being called damaged often means no longer exploitable. These accusations say far more about the narcissist's unmet dependency than about the empath's capacity for intimacy. The empath did not become less human. They became less available for extraction. At its core, blame, shifting, and sexual shaming function as avoidance strategies. They shield the narcissist from grief, responsibility, and the unsettling realization that they relied on borrowed energy to feel whole. Facing that truth would require humility and inner work. Rewriting the narrative is easier. It preserves the illusion of control while deepening disconnection. The narcissist may convince themselves they have moved on, but the intensity of their blame reveals unresolved attachment. In the end, the story the narcissist tells is not about the empath's flaws. It is about the narcissist's refusal to face loss honestly. The empath's withdrawal did not create coldness, it exposed imbalance. The shaming does not reflect reality. It reflects fear of emptiness, fear of dependency, and fear of seeing themselves clearly. And while the narcissist continues rewriting the past, the empath, grounded in self-trust, moves forward without needing to explain, justify, or carry labels that were never theirs to begin with. When the empath withdraws their energy, the narcissist often faces a sudden vacuum, an absence of the emotional and sexual resonance that once fed their sense of self. This loss exposes a profound dependency that is difficult for them to face directly. Without access to a responsive, attuned source of energy, they may turn inward, seeking stimulation in ways that feel safe, controllable, and, most importantly, devoid of vulnerability. This is where pornography or fantasy dependency can emerge, sometimes subtly, sometimes with intensity. Unlike real relationships, these artificial sources offer predictable outcomes, no risk of rejection, no emotional responsibility, no reflection of their own inner emptiness. The narcissist can enter these worlds repeatedly, chasing stimulation while avoiding the self-awareness that might make the emptiness unbearable. What once was externalized through the empath now becomes internalized, but in a carefully controlled, artificial environment. Fantasy and pornography provide an illusion of connection and power that feels familiar. The narcissist can script scenarios where they are desired, in control, and admired. These fantasies often exaggerate dynamics that mirror past interactions with the empath. Intense focus, attention, and energy flowing toward them, but without the unpredictable emotional complexity of real human interaction. They no longer have to adjust, empathize, or negotiate. The empath's emotional signals, which once provided richness and depth, are replaced by images or imagined scenarios that guarantee instant feedback. The exchange becomes mechanical, the stimulation fleeting, and the sense of mastery illusory. What makes this dependency particularly insidious is the subtle shift from enjoyment to compulsion. Initially, fantasy may serve as a temporary outlet for the loss of energy. It offers brief relief from restlessness or inner emptiness. But over time, it becomes a primary mechanism for self-regulation. The narcissist begins to rely on these artificial sources to feel alive, to feel in control, or to soothe discomfort. Because real-life interactions are inherently unpredictable and require effort and vulnerability, they start to feel unsafe or unrewarding. The controlled environment of fantasy or pornography becomes a substitute for real connection, a refuge from the challenge of authenticity. This reliance can escalate further when real-world encounters fail to provide immediate or intense stimulation. The narcissist, now accustomed to instantaneous and fully controllable responses, finds ordinary interactions dull or unsatisfying. They may withdraw from relationships, avoiding emotional labor, or disengage from intimacy that requires mutual vulnerability. The empath's absence intensifies this pattern. The steady, energetic regulation once provided by the empath is now replaced by an endless pursuit of artificial feedback, leading to cycles of consumption and emptiness that are difficult to break. Fantasy dependency also amplifies internalized objectification. In these imagined scenarios, other people exist as props or instruments to satisfy the narcissist's desires. Unlike with the empath, there is no reciprocity, no shared emotional field, no accountability. People are reduced to placeholders, objects for consumption that never push back, never disappoint, and never expose the narcissist's inner instability. While this offers temporary comfort, it reinforces a worldview where intimacy is transactional and energy is taken rather than shared. Over time, this pattern deepens isolation and erodes the ability to form genuine connections. Another layer of this dependency is the illusion of mastery it provides. The narcissist feels in control of their fantasies in a way that they cannot control the world outside. The empath's detachment, calm, and independence are unpredictable, and that unpredictability threatens the narcissist's fragile sense of self. In contrast, fantasy provides certainty. Every desire is fulfilled on demand. Every scenario unfolds as imagined, and no boundaries exist except those imposed by the narcissist themselves. Yet the very control that offers comfort also amplifies detachment from reality. Each artificial encounter makes actual intimacy feel more distant, more complex, and more uncomfortable. Shame and self-disgust often accompany this cycle, even if they are pushed aside. The narcissist may recognize, consciously or unconsciously, that artificial stimulation is a poor substitute for real energetic exchange. They may feel frustration that nothing real can match the intensity of fantasy, yet the habit persists because it is easier than confronting vulnerability. Fantasy and pornography allow them to escape the discomfort of self-reflection, emotional responsibility, and authentic connection. The brief spike of arousal or excitement masks the deeper emptiness, creating a repeating loop where stimulation is sought, satisfaction is fleeting, and emptiness returns stronger than before. The empath's withdrawal indirectly reinforces this pattern by removing checks on behavior. When a responsive, attuned partner was present, emotional cues, boundaries, and energetic feedback created natural limitations. The narcissist had to navigate real connection, adapt to signals, and face consequences. Now, in the absence of that exchange, these artificial outlets provide a shortcut. They allow sensation without negotiation, control without accountability, and stimulation without vulnerability. In this sense, pornography and fantasy function as coping tools, temporary relief that gradually morphs into dependency. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. As reliance on artificial stimulation grows, real-life engagement diminishes. The narcissist becomes increasingly intolerant of unpredictability and emotional labor. Relationships that require compromise, empathy, or shared energy feel draining compared to the effortless, predictable stimulation of fantasy. This not only perpetuates isolation, but deepens the inner sense of emptiness they are trying to escape. Their nervous system becomes attuned to artificial feedback, and the emotional richness of real life feels increasingly distant, less controllable, and more uncomfortable. Ultimately, increased pornography or fantasy dependency highlights the underlying truth of the narcissist's struggle. The absence of an empath exposes their reliance on external energy. Real intimacy is no longer accessible, and without it, the narcissist seeks substitutes that promise control, immediacy, and lack of vulnerability. Yet these substitutes can never fulfill the deep energetic need that the empath once provided. What begins as coping turns into a cycle of detachment, objectification, and isolation. The narcissist may experience moments of exhilaration or power, but beneath that, a persistent emptiness remains, echoing the very void that the empath's withdrawal first revealed. Over time, the dependency reinforces the need for control over connection, preference for predictability over vulnerability, and retreat from authentic emotional exchange. The more they immerse themselves in these artificial channels, the further they drift from real energetic connection, learning the hard way that sensation alone cannot replace the depth of shared human presence. When a narcissist loses access to an empath, the outward appearance is often one of indifference. They may act as if the separation means nothing, as if they never needed the empath in the first place. But beneath that performance lies a deep, often frantic, desperation. The loss of consistent emotional and sexual energy creates a void that cannot be filled by anyone else. Even when the narcissist appears calm or unconcerned, their mind and nervous system are often preoccupied with ways to reattach, to reclaim what has been removed. This is where the pattern of hoovering begins, a subtle, insidious attempt to regain connection, to stimulate the supply that once regulated their inner world. Hoovering is rarely direct at first. It starts in shadows, a memory evoked here, a subtle reference there, small reminders designed to provoke attention without appearing intrusive. Each action is carefully calculated to reconnect, to test whether the empath can be drawn back into their orbit. The tactics can be almost imperceptible. A message sent under the guise of casual concern, a shared memory framed as nostalgia, or even a compliment that seems innocent, all serve as probes. Each probe is designed to evoke a reaction, any reaction, because a response indicates that the energy flow has not completely ended. The narcissist is not seeking a true conversation or meaningful connection. They are seeking evidence that the empath's presence, attention, and vitality are still accessible. Even the slightest acknowledgement, a reply, a smile, or a shared laugh can reignite hope, fueling the cycle of attachment and obsession. This is what makes hoovering so dangerous. It is a tactical, almost surgical attempt to reestablish the flow of emotional and sexual energy that once reinforced the narcissist's sense of self. The psychological mechanics behind this desperation are revealing. The narcissist's identity is often built around control, validation, and the extraction of energy. When that extraction stops, their internal world becomes unregulated. Anxiety rises, restlessness increases, and a sense of incompleteness takes over. The empath's withdrawal is not just a refusal of intimacy. It is a refusal to provide the energetic sustenance that stabilizes the narcissist's ego. Hoovering, then, is an instinctive strategy to re-establish regulation. The narcissist attempts to pull back what has been removed without admitting their dependency. By framing their attempts as casual, playful, or even innocent, they avoid confronting the truth of their reliance on someone else's energy, while still attempting to restore it. This pattern often escalates over time. What begins as subtle probes may evolve into more overt attempts, direct messages, emotional appeals, or deliberate reminders of intimacy and shared history. The goal remains the same: to draw the empath's energy back into circulation. Narcissists often employ what can be called emotional breadcrumbs, small, tantalizing hints of the past that trigger memories of connection, warmth, or attention. Each breadcrumb is designed to destabilize the empath's calm and provoke an instinctive response. The narcissist measures the success of these tactics not by the quality of interaction, but by the degree of attention received. If the empath engages even minimally, the narcissist experiences a brief surge of validation. If the empath does not respond, frustration builds, and the intensity of the hoovering increases. One of the most insidious aspects of this dynamic is the way the narcissist weaponizes nostalgia and intimacy. Memories of shared experiences are reframed to create longing or guilt. A joke, a song, or even a photograph can be leveraged as a subtle reminder of connection, a reminder that energy once flowed freely and could flow again. This is particularly effective because empaths are highly attuned to emotional cues and often feel responsibility for the emotional impact of their past interactions. The narcissist relies on this sensitivity, knowing that even minimal engagement can temporarily restore their sense of potency and importance. Hoovering is rarely sustained by overt confrontation. It thrives in ambiguity. The narcissist may send mixed signals: warmth followed by coldness, attention followed by withdrawal, intrigue followed by disinterest. These fluctuations create emotional tension that draws the empath into mental and emotional engagement. The unpredictability mirrors the dynamics of the original relationship, exploiting patterns that once ensured compliance and availability. Every small reaction from the empath becomes evidence that the supply has not been entirely cut off, creating a cycle of hope, reaction, and partial fulfillment. For the narcissist, this is not love or attachment, it is energy recovery, a desperate attempt to fill the void left by the empath's boundaries. It is important to understand that hoovering is not usually about reconciliation or repair. The narcissist does not seek mutual understanding, resolution, or healing. The empath's emotional autonomy is secondary to the narcissist's need for energy. If reattachment is achieved, it is often temporary and conditional, based on the empath's availability, rather than genuine emotional engagement. This is why hoovering can feel manipulative, confusing, and exhausting to the empath. Each attempt is designed to provoke a reaction, to maintain the narcissist's sense of influence, and to forestall the reality that they are no longer central to someone's energy field. The desperation to reconnect can manifest in many forms. Some narcissists attempt subtle seduction, reminders of intimacy, or flirtation, often disguised as casual interaction. Others may invoke shared history, emphasizing emotional or sexual experiences in a way that stirs memory and longing. Even indirect methods, social media posts, mutual connections, or public displays, can serve as tools to capture attention. Every effort reflects a singular goal: re-establish access to the empath's energy, even without acknowledgement of past harm or accountability. The deeper truth behind hoovering is that the narcissist cannot self-regulate. Emotional, sexual, and energetic depletion creates restlessness, agitation, and inner emptiness that cannot be soothed by solitude or reflection. The empath's absence is not just a loss of access. It is a mirror showing the narcissist their dependence, their vulnerability, and their internal instability. The desperation to reattach is therefore as much about self-preservation as it is about reclaiming someone else's energy. Without intervention, the pattern often repeats across relationships, demonstrating that the behavior is not personal but systemic, a reflection of reliance on external regulation rather than internal balance. When a narcissist loses access to an empath, the consequences extend far beyond simple frustration or disappointment. For them, sex and intimacy were never about union, shared presence, or connection. They were purely transactional, a way to extract energy and reinforce a fragile sense of self. The empath's energy once acted like a stabilizing current, keeping their emotional, psychological, and even spiritual state in balance. When that source is removed, the narcissist is left unmoored, and the absence reverberates throughout their entire being. This creates a form of spiritual disconnection, a subtle but profound imbalance that is rarely acknowledged openly. The energy that was once drawn from the empath no longer flows, and the narcissist is forced to confront the fact that they have been relying on another's vitality to feel alive. The body and mind react before awareness catches up. Sleep becomes difficult, restlessness increases, and a lingering emptiness sets in. Insomnia is often one of the first visible signs. Nights that once provided downtime and mental reset now stretch endlessly. The mind races with thoughts of what was lost, with fantasies of reclaiming what is gone, or with compulsive self-focus designed to fill the void. Sleep, once restorative, becomes impossible, because the internal energy system no longer has the regulation it once received externally. Alongside insomnia, agitation becomes almost constant. Even minor stimuli feel irritating or overwhelming. The narcissist may pace, fidget, or engage in compulsive activities simply to generate sensations strong enough to mask the emptiness inside. Where an empath's presence once offered grounding and calm, now there is a void that creates internal chaos. Emotional dysregulation, restlessness, and impulsive behavior often follow, because the nervous system has been trained to rely on external energy flow. Without that stabilizing source, the narcissist's internal environment becomes turbulent. They may overreact to minor events, feel frustrated with minimal provocation, or experience waves of irritability that seem disproportionate. This agitation is not simply personality. It is the nervous system screaming for the regulation it no longer receives. The emptiness that emerges is not just psychological, it is spiritual. Energy that was once borrowed from the empath is no longer available, and the narcissist often lacks the capacity to generate it internally. The absence of authentic, reciprocal energetic exchange creates a sense of hollowness, a subtle but pervasive feeling that something essential has been stripped away. This is why even moments of pleasure, social activity, or superficial attention feel unsatisfying. The empath provided not only sexual and emotional stimulation, but also a form of energetic grounding, a sense of being seen and validated at a deep level.